Those of us who understand the complex nature of a teal's life, the protection and food needed to grow feathers that send that image darting over the water, also understand what the chase and the kill do to the spirit of a man, their rewards and their shames. Because we understand and feel these things more acutely than our peers, it is sacrilegious of us not to protect with all of our might what resources remain to be saved. If we neglect our obligations, we deserve the contempt of generations to come.
You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
Running a small business means I wear lots of hats. When I put on my hiring hat, I can count on LinkedIn Hiring Pro to make it easy. LinkedIn Hiring Pro helps manage my hiring workflow, puts my job post in front of a unique network of professionals, and matches me with the best candidates for my business. I can also share my job with my network. No other job site lets me do that. No wonder most small businesses say they'd use LinkedIn Hiring Pro again. Hire right the first time. Post your job for free on LinkedIn today at linkedin.com/quality.
¿Escuchan eso? Es el delicioso encuentro entre un Extra Crispy McCrispy Strip y la cremosa salsa César. Si así suena, solo imagínate cómo sabe. Salsa César, en McDonald's por tiempo limitado. Ba, 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 ba.
Are you willing to let duck populations fade? We talk about the weather and how it affects duck migration a lot on the Foul Weather Podcast. But we know one thing for sure. If ducks are never produced, it does not matter what the weather does. Ducks that don't hatch can't come south each duck season. We also know that ducks need wetlands to produce more ducks. But here we are. And you've heard about it already probably. And if you have not, we're going to tell you today. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, for some reason, is advancing a proposal that could reduce the 1.7 million acres of wetland easements that they hold. And remember that these wetland easements were paid for with your duck stamp dollars. And as far as we can see, they may be gone in the coming years under these new changes. Wetlands possibly gone forever. With over half of the prairie pothole wetlands already gone and duck numbers struggling, we don't want to lose more acres. Whew. All right, that's heavy stuff. As noted on the Foul Weather social media posts and on this Monday morning's episode, we were working hard to get waterfall experts on to dissect and help us learn about what is happening with the Fish and Wildlife Service prairie pothole wetland easements. And I'd say we aimed high because we got both Dr. Scott Stevens, Senior Director of Conservation Strategy, and Dr. Mike Brasher, Senior Waterfall Scientist, with us tonight. Both of Ducks Unlimited. These men are passionate duck hunter conservationists, and we're honored to have them on the Foul Weather Podcast to help learn about this important topic. I guess the way I like to state it when people ask me about this potential Fish and Wildlife Service policy change, the Foul Weather Podcast position is this. This all could be worse than bad. And I don't mean to chuckle, but it is potentially worse than bad. Dr. Stevens, Dr. Brasher, Scott, and Mike, welcome into this special alert episode of the Foul Weather Podcast.
Great to be
Thanks,
here,
Mike.
Mike.
It's great to be back with you.
We appreciate the chance to sort of spread the word and share the message with your audience about this challenge, because we agree the stakes are pretty high here.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, I put a lot of flavor into my stuff. I feel I write technically all the time. And y'all get to write some really cool, like, popular articles for DU Magazine and stuff. But most of my stuff is, like, some pretty nerdy things. And I like to write in a kind of, flavory fashion that catches people's attention. So I hope folks felt that on the front end. But we really kind of first want to note that this issue, I'm going to put just quotes around the issue because and you guys are going to help us understand it. It's moving fast. And I got some information this morning that's kind of brand new. I know our friends at the Standard Sportsman did a great interview with both of you, and I think it came out earlier today. Folks should go look at that. That's Tuesday, 28 July, that came out, the same day as we're recording this. But maybe Scott, Mike, whichever, y'all just jump right in and give us kind of like the new highlights, because I think there's some new stuff, and we can walk it back through what the traditional easement process is. The common questions we're getting are like, what's an RFI, a request for information? What was the 2024 easement rule? And what's happening that might change it all for the ducks? These are like questions, like I'm getting berated on social media email by folks. So I really want you guys to kind of shed some light on the new stuff, and then we'll kind of walk it back through the other info. So take it away.
Yeah. So, Mike, I'll start here. The first thing that I'm going to do, and I'll repeat this multiple times, we have Ducks Unlimited have established a website where people can go to find more information about this. And that website is ducks.org/save the duck factory. You'll see some links in there that take you to a place where you can submit some comments. Mike will probably get you a link where you can send people and they can sign a petition. There's a number of things we're asking you to do related to this issue. But so yeah, when we recorded some of these earlier episodes, we've been doing this for, I don't know, gosh, it seems like a week, but it's actually only been like a day and a half. When we did some of these yesterday, the thing at issue was that we knew that the Fish and Wildlife Service had posted a quote request for information in the Federal Register last Friday. That request for information said the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's request information regarding the service's process for calculating setbacks for the placement of drain tile by landowners on property where the service owns wetland easements. These are wetland easements purchased with duck stamp dollars from duck stamp hunters and other conservationists for generations. And so obviously Ducks Unlimited's antenna goes super high anytime we see something like that, because as we get into the details, you'll understand why that is important. So that's kind of what the way we framed this up yesterday is like, hey, okay, the Fish and Wildlife Service is asking for our input because they're wanting to consider some things. One of our policy staff last night around 2:15 a.m. was, and bless their heart for doing work for the ducks at 2:15 in the morning. Let's give
the backstory that I got is there was a little human in their house that was up and was not sleeping was what generated this opportunity.
That's a future duck conservation is right there.
That's right.
I love it.
Shout out to Little Mac.
That's right. And so that person came across another federal website. It's Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. It is reginfo.gov and then sort of a long URL. But there is a piece in here and apparently this has been out for several weeks.
We think this came out over 4th of July weekend, as near as we can tell.
Something like that. It says, we, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, propose to withdraw the final rule published on May 13th, 2024, that established regulations pertaining to wetland easements pursuant to National Wildlife Refuge Administrative Act, yada, 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 yada. After reviewing the 2024 rule and its implementation over the last 2 years, the service has determined that it is necessary to withdraw the rule. So here we are with you now, Mike, a few hours later from when we're speaking and talking and trying to organize things earlier, with new information saying the Fish and Wildlife Service is saying they have a little bit more in mind than just requesting information. They already have a proposal on this docket here in this office saying we want to repeal this rule. We want to pull it back. Now, why that is a concern will be laid bare as we get into what that rule does and why we are so adamant that we want the service to reconsider this proposal to withdraw that rule. We want them to keep this rule on the books because it protects the investments of generations of duck hunters in the protection of prairie wetlands. That's where we are. That's what this is about.
Yeah, and I don't want to waste too much time in chit chat. We always talk about like, how's your hunting season and like what's your farm doing? But
there'll be time for that later.
There's time for that later. Listeners really want to know, the background, the root of the problem, how to help, right? Our Facebook post on this subject got 70,000 views since Sunday morning, 150 shares. So it's obvious duck hunters are way fired up about losing more duck habitat. And I'd say through drain tile, through wetland drainage. So whoever wants to, let's kind of speak to the benefits of the Fish and Wildlife Service easements to date for farmers and ducks, where the funds come from and what the benefits are to duck hunters.
Yeah, Scott, this is your part. You take over. What are
okay.
easements? And we're going to unpack this. What's drain tile? What are setbacks, et cetera? I mean, this is all important.
Yeah, we'll try and unpack that. So I'll start with a little history of the easement program. So all of us here know, everyone has been required to purchase a duck stamp since 1934 to hunt migratory birds. The proceeds from the sale of those stamps has gone into a fund to be invested in habitat. And, for a long time, the primary investment was Fish and Wildlife Service would use those funds to purchase in fee title refuges and waterfowl production areas. In the early 60s, Fish and Wildlife Service received authorization to purchase these conservation easements, and we'll dive into a little bit of details on that. These are in a class of limited conservation easements. So, easements can span a whole gradient of restricting all rights to restricting just a few rights. This is more on the side of a few rights. And in this case, the specific rights that these easements restrict are the right to drain, fill, burn, and level. 4 things: drain, fill, burn, and level wetlands. And, these are focused in the prairie pothole region. So, with the ability to purchase these easements, they negotiate with landowners. There's a one-time payment for the acres that are covered by the easement in exchange for the landowner signing a contract that says, yep, I won't drain, fill, burn. And specific to the drain, it says, quote unquote, by ditching or any other means, direct or indirect. So we will come back to that as we talk about other things, but there's a specific clause in there that's like, here's my layman's version. No way, no how can you impact the wetland. Right?
Like a no harm clause. No harm.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's like the standard here is no drainage may occur. Mm-hmm. So, landowners negotiate these with the Fish and Wildlife Service. There's a one-time payment. From a conservation standpoint, I'd argue these easements are a good bargain because, we're only paying for that limited rights. Those rights protect the habitat value that we're interested in, but we don't have to pay for the full fee value. Doesn't have to be maintained. These remain in private ownership. Landowners continue to farm or ranch on these properties, and, good deal overall. The total estate of those wetland easements in the prairie pothole region right now, the estimate that I had, round numbers, about 1.7 million acres. And what I would say about these easements, when we think about waterfowl habitat and sort of the status of that, we put these in a bucket where we say, these are across the finish line. These are protected forever, right? We don't have to worry about these. We turn our focus and say, what's the next acre that I can get? And what's the next track adjacent to that has a bunch of wetlands, right? So, we have for a long time said, yep, wetlands protected by easement, those are covered, done deal, we're good. Well, this request for information, and now we know the intent is to, rescind the rule. That gives us pause. It's like, well, we better make sure, because that was the agreement sort of struck with duck hunters. My argument would be, this is an asset base that duck hunters have invested in for 92 years. And, now we're talking about, okay, are there going to be some adjustments in that? So that's why this is important. That's why we're on here to, talk about this and ask folks to activate. So that's kind of the easement equation. Now we have to merge, how do easements sort of relate to tile drainage? So I think last time we talked about the fact tile drainage been around for a long time. You guys talked about, somebody has the Tile Drainage Museum is that one in Ohio, Mike?
Well, Drainage Hall of Fame.
Drainage Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame's in Ohio, and there is a Drainage Tile Museum in Geneva, New York.
Okay.
And I think the Europeans actually came over, and like the Montezuma region I'm near was so wet, like the original drain tile, as far as I've been taught, that went in the United States was like in my backyard, which is, it's kind of a kind of a cool thing. There's also
Yeah.
like the Erie Canal that drained everything that I can almost walk to from my house. So,
Right.
Yeah.
like as a wetland scientist sitting next to this, it's kind of interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
like
A
drain
little bit of
tile has a
irony there.
long. There is irony, yeah. And I didn't even know it. Like we moved
Yeah.
into the farm, and then I was like, oh, we
So-
live in this drainage armpit of the world. But
Yeah. So that technology has been around for some time. You know, and obviously started in places like you live, Mike, in the Far East, and that makes sense. Now, sort of the intersection where we have most of the acreage of this easement estate would be in the Prairie Pottle region. Most of the acres are going to be in the two Dakotas. So that area didn't see much drain tile interest until the early 2000s. And the story that I tell is, and this is connected to the crop types that are grown there. So when I moved to Bismarck, North Dakota in 2003, primary agriculture was small grains, wheat, barley, some other small grains, sunflowers, flax, those kind of things. Not much corn and soybeans, maybe in the Red River Valley, way to the east. But in duck country, not much of that. Now, move on to end of the 2000s into the 2010s, we saw advancement in, the varieties of those crops, corn and soybeans, and lots of companies were pushing to advance the genetics and the drought tolerance and those things. And we saw the acres expand. And so the distinct memory I have is driving around that landscape. There's grid roads, and you come to an intersection, there's four corners there. For the first time, when I had been in North Dakota, I came to an intersection and I could not see if anyone was coming because there was a cornfield on all four corners.
And for people, I mean, people come from all corners of the earth that listen to the podcast, right?
Right.
So there's not stop signs at every four corners, and
No.
there are dirt roads that are a mile square, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not like, I mean, you got to see the other person come, and you kind of slow down. Some people, not everybody,
Right.
but
Yeah. And in this
the
area,
corn matters, like for seeing the intersection.
Yeah.
Okay.
And historically, that was not an issue. Wheat fields were a couple feet tall. It's like you could see someone coming for miles away. And it's like, oh, I have to slow down and almost stop because there's 7-foot tall corn here that obscures my view. So that was sort of a marker for me of, oh, the cropping in this geography is changing. And that's borne out by the data, right? So now we have higher value crops that are more sensitive to having, roots that are wet for too long. That will really reduce yield. So thus, producers are trying to make a living. These are higher value crops they can make more profit on. It's like, oh, now we're going to think about drain tile and making that capital investment that will provide them with returns. So now what we have is we have drain tile coming in to this geography where we have scattered across it these Fish and Wildlife Service wetland easements. So the challenge for the service is, okay, remember the terms in that easement that we talked about. Cannot drain by ditching or any other means, direct or indirect, right? So it's like, okay, that's what they specify. That's what the agreement says that they've signed with thousands of landowners. So now they've got to figure out, how are we going to make sure that drain tile doesn't contravene those terms, but that people can still install it in the uplands, as long as it doesn't, cause wetland drainage.
So what you're looking for farmers is compliance with the easement agreement, but also improving yield through appropriate drainage in areas that seem reasonable to have drain tile.
Yep, exactly. So, the three of us were fans of science. The Fish and Wildlife Service leans on science. So they, got some expertise in hydrology and went to work on, okay, there are factors that really make a big difference in the influence that drain tile has on wetlands. They include the depth of the tile relative to the elevation of the wetland, the lateral distance from the wetland edge that the tile is placed. There were equations that they could work through. They developed this equation, went through it, and said, okay, here's the recommendations for how we believe we need to install tile to not impact wetlands. And, in this case, this has to be a pretty tailored approach. So, an individual tract has different soils, topography, all those things. And basically the way it's done is these models, these equations are applied per that tract. And then the Fish and Wildlife Service says these are the areas you need to exclude from having drain tile to make sure that we stay in compliance with the terms of that easement. So that's the way these came together. So what they developed were these setback distances. It's not like there's a standard distance, like you must be 22 feet from the edge of the wetland. It's all very nuanced, done for each track, that kind of thing. So that's what this RFI, and now we know the intent is to repeal the rule. That's what they're looking for information on. And, from our standpoint, the rule did a few things. It introduced some certainty for landowners. And by going through this process, they said, we will hold harmless. You will have safe harbor from any downstream impacts if you go through the process, we do the calculations, we say stay out of these areas, and then it turns out something was in error or there was an impact on a wetland, no repercussions for the landowner.
Not on you.
That's right.
You went through the process. Yep.
Yeah. So that's important. If we think about what are important features of these kind of rules, like producers like those kind of things, right? They want certainty. They want to be held harmless if they've done things the proper way. The 2024 rule provided all those things. So, there has been, there has been some discussion out there that we need to change the rule because we need to provide those things. No, the rule provides those things currently. So
the comment of revising or I think it's removing the rule, is that it's actually saying we need these things, but it sounds to me like my interpretation is the things already exist. Right? The protection for the farmer from, I don't want to use the word liability, harm like anything impact on the easement that it's already been signed off on. And it also protects the easement, which is funded through duck stamp money that duck hunters paid for. And, other people that buy duck stamps, they care about wetlands and all the great things wetlands do. Mostly that's duck hunters, but I don't want to leave out the people that buy duck stamps as well.
Right. Yep.
And so I guess I'm kind of talking in circles because it seems confusing to me, and maybe it is like the comment is, we got to fix this, but it's not broken.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the reality is that with any of these kind of issues, you're going to find people that are going to disagree with that, right? There are going to be some people that say, nope, I don't like that. For whatever reason, it didn't work for me. And I think that's probably what we're facing. Well, I know it is. I mean, and we don't really, we don't know who they are exactly. We don't know exactly where it's coming from, but we know there is some feeling that this isn't a rule that that a certain segment of landowners is very happy with, because they're wanting to change it for one reason or another. And that concerns us, because when we look at this rule, it does exactly what we think it should with regard to the things that it was designed to do: bring in consistency, transparency, and clarity, and safe harbor for easement landowners. And as a point that Scott has made on other episodes, and we have emphasized, is that there is a backlog of landowners looking to voluntarily enter into additional agreements with the service for these conservation easements. Mm-hmm. If this was such a bad process, if this was such a bad deal, if this was such a bad thing to go through for landowners, we wouldn't have a backlog that we couldn't pay for if we had another $100 million in hand right now.
In ducks.
Yeah, that's right. Why is the dog eating the dog food if the dog food ain't no good? Right?
Yeah.
Wait.
Let's do that one again for the listeners, because I got to follow it too.
Well, that's because what I've used before, it's like, oh, if this is so good, why ain't the dog eating the dog food? It's like something that isn't working, and it's like, yep, I understand that. But in this case, it's like the dog's eating the dog food. So why are you saying the dog food's bad?
Not to call landowners, farmers, or ranchers dogs and anything like that.
That isn't. No.
Let me.
Dogs
No,
are
it's
dogs
just
are
a
our best
saying.
friend.
It's just a saying, folks. It's fine. And let me back it up. I mean, I grew up in the foothills of the Allegheny Mountains, but the family, owned a vegetable farm in Western New York. My grandfather ran the Buffalo Farmers Market for years, and I hung around farm stands and all that stuff. Not big like row crop agriculture, but as I've moved around and I end up in duck country, I end up in more productive soil, and I end up hanging out in rural communities with farmers. I buy seed from one of the biggest seed dealers down the road from me for my food plots. And the one thing I find is that, like, when farmers get on a thing, there's like, it's not a mob mentality. It's like it's working for me. Let's do it. Right. But when somebody does something that's out of the ordinary, it's very cliquey and it gets called out. And so the fact that you have farmers coming to you and saying, can I sign up for this easement? Can I sign up for this easement? It's not even cliquey to the point that it's like makes you an outsider. It's a tool in the toolbox for them when they need it to bring money into the farm. They've got low ground they can't farm. But one of the things I want to ask is, like, maybe some of this is my grandfather or my father signed into this and now I've got it, or it changed hands, and so now I'm unhappy with it. Is there some of that going on?
There's definitely some of that, because you think about this, it's like some of the earliest of these wetland easements were purchased in the early 60s, right? So we're what, 60 years down the road from that? Yeah, so some of this land has changed hands multiple times. Now, in theory, when we talk about easements, it's like, okay, if you're purchasing land and you do your due diligence, and your lawyer who's involved should be saying, hey, there's a deed restriction on here.
Right.
You should take that into account when you make the offer on this property.
Yep.
If it's, the value that you would pay for that with a deed restriction, like an easement, should be less than a completely unencumbered piece of property, right? So in theory, in the markets, this is what the economists would tell us, like that should be priced in to the value that you paid for the property. Now some folks, maybe when they bought it, they didn't have a lawyer, or their lawyer didn't notice that, and they paid the price that they would have paid for an unencumbered property. And that's unfortunate, but like that's how that should work, right? So that's some of it, Mike. But
I also wonder if, like, we've been in a dry spell for a while. There's a little lag here. Folks are looking at ground that they're like, can I do something else with that? Can I get it's like mildly wet? I mean, I'm speculating, right? Like, if we were in a wet phase and this stuff was just crazy wet and nobody could farm it, there's kind of like that's what it is. But when you go into a dry phase, I feel like there might be a little bit of questioning about those spots that aren't quite as wet as they were maybe when the agreement was signed.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully I'm not wading into weird territory. I'm just
somebody else.
I've been in the prairies and I've been thinking about like the cycles. Like, these aren't stagnant. They get big, they get
They're
small,
not stagnant.
and that makes it very confusing as to what the proper edge of this is for conservation, I think.
Yeah. Someone else asked that today. We've done enough of these. I can't remember who. And
Sorry.
My response, Mike, was I could be wrong. It's like, the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
My guess would be, I think more of this is driven by the change that we've seen in the crop types, and the market drives a bunch of this, right? So, now probably the most common crops are corn and soybeans across much of that geography, right? So, it's sort of table stakes to be putting in drain tile in many cases if you have areas that are wet with those. So my theory is that those things are probably bigger drivers, but we absolutely go through wet and dry periods, and folks are responding to those and thinking about how they continue to make a living out there. So I respect that, but these folks are trying to make it work economically. Now, the point that I would tie back to is what Mike pointed out. We still have lots of producers, like our folks in North Dakota just had a chunk of funding that they were able to seek these kind of things in collaboration with the Fish and Wildlife Service and their were a bunch of landowners in the Devil's Lake Basin who showed up and said, yep, we're interested in wetland easements. So those folks are smart enough business people that they're saying the compensation that I'm receiving makes sense from an economic standpoint, right? So a key point here is, these still make sense economically. If we were in the situation where, hey, we're offering this and no one is showing up, to participate, that would be a different story. But producers are signaling this is working for them economically with the payment they get for the restrictions that come with it. So, that's an important piece of the puzzle here, I think.
Let me ask one thing, because I did talk about the cycle. So your statement was like lots of no harm, but when these dry out on their own,
Yep.
can you farm through them?
Yep. Yeah. Remember, restrictions are drain, fill. Now I'm not going to be able to
Burn.
get more. Level and burn.
Level, burn.
Drain,
Yeah,
fill, level, burn. Right. So cultivate when dry. Yep. Explicitly allowed.
So this is like this is what gets me is like the cycle of the prairies. Like, let's keep these things, right? Because we're talking about, let's go through like class 1 to class 5s at some point, but we're talking about in a large amount of these, a good portion of them, maybe 50%, the shallow ones that are really good for breeding pairs, really good for like a hen mallard to show up and get the protein that she needs to produce eggs. Because that protein that is producing those ducklings, producing those eggs, is coming from the prairies.
That's
and
right.
those shallow ones warm up quicker. They get invertebrates quicker. And so from a farmer perspective, I've got this thing in this easement. And yeah, there's some really wet years. But honestly, like if you look at the big duck booms, like how many of those giant wet cycles happen?
Right.
Like I'm guessing these guys are farming through these farmers are farming through these.
Well, there's a bunch of areas
50% of the time, 60% of the time.
Yeah.
And but if you don't put tile on them, when it gets wet, we still get the boom of ducks.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, Mike, the other thing that we haven't spent much time talking about in any of our discussions, Scott and I, we're really hammering home the value of these things for ducks because that's the nature of these conservation easements, what they were designed to secure the habitat values for waterfowl. That is clear. But it's also clear from some other research that our colleagues in Canada and others have done to look at what the effect of wetland drainage is on some pieces of property. And when you do anything that reduces the ability of a wetland basin to hold water, which drain tile is designed to do, you reduce the capacity of that landscape to retain and gradually release rainwater, stormwater that falls. And we are at a situation now, any of us can point to times and places where we have seen flash floods and devastating effects of downstream floods. And that is also something that should be valued here when we talk about these conservation easements and protecting their ability to hold some of this water on that landscape and mitigate some of those downstream flood risk. This isn't just a duck question. This isn't just a duck discussion. It's all of these other values that these wetlands can provide when they retain that full capacity to hold water as they're supposed to, subject to the topography and so forth, and so many segments of society benefit from that. This should be an interest to many people, to people well beyond just duck hunters.
Right.
Yeah, it's an absolutely great comment. And Devil's Lake keeps flooding. We have, when did I work in 1998, 97 in Northeast South Dakota. And if you look at the map, the lakes around Waubay National Wildlife Refuge and kind of Wetland Conservation District, I think it was.
Yeah.
The lakes they have all different names. Like you go to Google Maps and Google Earth and they have different names, but they're all one lake.
That's right. They're combined.
A lot of it is we started to put this drain tile in and we started a ditch and we just emptied. I mean, the water's got to go somewhere. It's all basin linked. And so we've got all these permanents and semi-permanents we're increasingly having. And that just doesn't affect there. It goes downstream, into the Missouri and the Mississippi. And we're seeing a lot flashier stuff. And some of that, I don't know. I mean, I watch the weather a lot. Things seem to be more volatile. Maybe we just have
events are more extreme.
Better news about it. I don't know. Maybe it's better news. Maybe events are more extreme, but having, more bathtubs to slowly spill over makes a heck of a lot of sense to me. So.
That's right. Yeah. Just wanted to draw out that point in that, we obviously, and you have a primarily duck hunter audience here, but I hope there's some other folks that are listening to this that care about things beyond ducks and duck habitat, because that's ultimately how we've talked about this a lot on in other places, how we ultimately win the day on conserving habitat for waterfowl and other migratory birds at a continental scale is by kind of assembling a coalition of a diverse interest, recognizing the diverse benefits that nature provides. Let's not lose that either,
Well, and one of the things I always work at as a hunter conservationist is talking to folks about like, hey, this has really been built on the backs of duck hunters, but these are the things you're getting from this. Like, let's all play together, I invite a lot of people over for roast duck on a kind of really nice charcoal grill that don't duck hunt, and then talk to them about this stuff, and they kind of get excited about it.
Good.
It's it'd be nice if as duck hunters we were like the thread that kind of pulls folks together, and specifically for wetlands, because we're the voice. We've been the voice for years, but we got to deliver that to other folks. I do the touchy-feely thing a little too much in the podcast, so we'll back out and get to easements. But I do want to, for the listenership, we've talked about, we're really talking about the nuts and bolts of this and what we think is going on, what the intent of this is. And from my perspective, I almost ran just like this as a news anchor and just pulled all the info. And the way I was going to couch it is like, this can't be good. We're not going to move drain tile further away from wetlands. There's change that people want coming, and it's not like I don't think it's going to get better. And the 2024 rule was really good. You've seen the like action required. It doesn't say action alert. It's not like, hey, we're just telling you about this. It literally says action required.
Yeah, this is kind of like the difference between the difference between a tornado watch and a warning, right? That's
right.
This is not a warning. A warning is where you pay attention. It's like there could be a tornado. You might need to take action. This is the watch where it's like, take up.
Yeah,
I messed it up.
You got it backwards.
Okay,
you got it backwards.
The watch. This is not a watch. This is a warning.
You didn't live in the South, that's for sure, man.
Take action.
You learn real quick. Well, the tornado watch is be on the lookout. Tornado warning, take cover. It's on the way.
Right. So we're in the take cover, only take action.
That's right.
Yeah. Important stuff is on the way. One thing that we haven't talked about that I think is relevant here is, we said, okay, we now clearly know from the other information that we found that the intent is to remove the 2024 rule. And we think the 2024 rule works pretty well to protect the asset base that was invested in, by duck hunters. But the other question, it's like, okay, well, and this is where we have to speculate a little bit. But the question is, well, what might it be replaced with, right? Like if it's not the 24 rule, where might we be headed? And I think, it's reasonable. We've been part of discussions, and one of the common questions that's been asked, it's like, well, there are other setback rules that are out there for USDA applies to landowners who need to make sure they stay in compliance with conservation compliance provisions like Swamp Buster. So they use the same formula, the same, hydrologic equation that the Fish and Wildlife Service does, but their standard is not no drainage. Their standard is minimal effects. So we think that, that's at least something that's been talked about. Now, the good news is that, we have one piece of research that in North Dakota took two wetlands, kept them as the control group, took two wetlands, applied, installed drainage tile using the USDA setbacks, and then monitored these in detail over 3 years. So the results of this is folks at Northern Prairie Wildlife Research Center did it.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
The results said, hey, the wetlands where we had tile installed according to USDA setbacks, again, meeting that minimum impact sort of standard, resulted in overall 7% reduction in the wet area, the inundation, the size of the wetland, if you will. Now, but one of those wetlands, I mentioned 3 years of study, one of those wetlands in 1 year, that inundated area or size of the wetland was reduced by 28% in 1 year of the study, 10% in the second year, and 17% in the third year. And looking at that data, our conclusion based on that is, this proposal to use USDA setbacks as, an idea for a replacement is not in line with the language in that easement document from the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Of no harm.
No drainage.
Mm-hmm.
By ditching or any other means, direct or indirect, like 28% reduction in the wetland area just doesn't meet that standard, right?
So if we somehow flipped and picked up the USDA worst case scenario, right? We're looking at that's been
the question that we've been asked. It's like, well, you guys are okay with USDA for conservation compliance. Why couldn't we use that here? And our answer would be, well, it's a different standard, allows, different setbacks. And the data tells us that does not satisfy the requirement of no drainage. May meet minimal effects, but does not meet the standard in the easements.
In the parlance of our times tends to be standardization of, I'm just going to use the term regulations or standardization of standards, right? Like that tends to be what we seem to be moving towards, reducing complexity, moving towards that. And this may be, I don't know. I mean, I'm saying it, not you. I'm speculating that we're trying to move towards something that is less than wetland friendly. Let's go with that.
And I think you have to have friendly. I think you have to have some of those conversations, and you can do so without saying that, hey, we know what's going to be proposed and it's not going to be a good thing, and this is exactly what it's going to, the detriment that it's going to cause. We don't really have to go that far. We don't have to have that level of certainty to understand and know that this isn't really a good thing. But you do have to go a few steps down that road to tell people that, I guess, to give them some scenarios and say, this is what we could be thinking about. And even at the low end, now, Mike, you said worst case scenario. I would say even at the low end, that's something that I'm not okay with. As a person who has contributed money to duck stamps, knowing that they're going to purchase wetlands, easements on wetlands and grasslands in the prairies, I'm not okay with a reduction in the value of those wetlands that I had entrusted the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to protect with those monies. So
this is like giving your money to a bank, and they're like, well, all of a sudden now we're going to charge you 5% on everything because we need to get ours. Right. Like, well, you did not enter into that agreement. You entered into the agreement that you were like, even your savings, like 1 or 2%, they're like, well, we need 5% of that because the bank lights need to stay on or something,
and
maybe that's a bad analogy, but it's like switching, like you're in a contract and now that contract is just completely changed without you, the investor, having the chance I guess we have input on it, but like it's if it happens and that investment gets lost, that's problematic, especially given the, you can't drain, you can't ditch, you can't burn, all that stuff.
Here's my analogy, Mike. I say that whole estate, that 1.7 million acres that duck stamp folks have paid for, duck stamp purchasers, that's our Habitat 401k. And every year, the annual return that we get on that is on ducks flying south, like that's the annual returns that we get.
Heck yeah.
And it feels like the question has been, how much of a reduction in the principal would you guys be okay with? And my answer is like pretty simple. None. I want the principal decreased by zero because I'm counting on an annual return. That's what I invested in. So,
and that money comes from duck hunters, and that is the agreement that was made with duck hunters. And duck hunters helped put that in place. And duck hunters, I mean, so many of us champion the purchasing, the spending of money and giving it to the federal government, with such a foreign concept in a lot of ways now, because we are told that money is going to be going to do this forever. You have our word for that. And now it's like, we have some reason to think that they may be questioning that.
It would be a massive breach of contract. I had a phone conversation with one of my grad students on the way, and he was asking about, like, on my way to work this morning driving, and he asked about it. And I said, I think that in my time, this, depending upon where it goes, and there's lots of ways this could go, and we don't know. But this could be one of the greatest conservation issues of my time in this field, I think. If it comes to fruition, I mean, there's been like things that have picked away at the edges. We all talk about those, right? Yeah. Duck habitats declined. There's lots of negative inputs, but this seems like a big sweeping one that could be the biggest thing of my time. And so that's where, like, I feel like we're having the lightest conversation because we're in like a podcast setting. We have to deliver the message. But when I'm talking to people, this is not how I talk.
Yeah.
Right? Like, my wife was like earlier, and friends are like, you need to take it down a notch, man. Like, this is a big thing. People should be fired up about it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so if you're just hearing this through like a calm voice, it's because we're trying to deliver you like the proper message. Right? So the point is, take action. I talked about that social media post having like 70,000 views. I went into the Federal Register where there's comments. First of all, I read 100 of them before I went to work this morning.
Oh, you can read them? I haven't figured out how to read them. Yeah.
Oh, you can go in. Yeah. One, that's on the RFI. Not one of them came from someone saying anything like we should drain more stuff. It was all very much in line. Hold up 2024 rule. There were some that were really short. There's some that were long and poignant. There were names I recognized. Like, if you put something up there, people are going to see it. But,
it's public record.
Don't write a dissertation, but get to the point, write something from the heart, but that uses the information from here. But make a comment. 70,000 views of our Facebook page post about this on Sunday that I put out on the Foul Weather put on Sunday morning. And as far as I could tell, there were like 3,989 comments right now. But I went through 100 of them. I felt like a good sample size. And none of them were like anti-duck, anti-wetland. Yeah. So I think we're getting there, but that number needs to go way up.
Yeah.
Between
Mike,
now
that's what I was
and August 7th. So
Mike, that's what I was going to say. I was going to ask the question. You know what I call that 3,900? A good start.
Right.
That's a good start. Not a great start. That's a good start.
Yeah.
We need to keep going. You're going to hear Scott and me and others on a number of podcasts. That is by design. This is an important issue. We know not everyone listens to the same podcast. We know there's a lot of overlap. We ask for your patience, I guess, in having to listen to us multiple times, but we want to assure you we wouldn't do it if we didn't consider this, and if we didn't know this was an absolutely critical issue for us to engage on. And we don't have a lot of time to do it. And here's the other thing that, as we were sort of talking before we started recording, we got to also thinking about, all right, there's a request for information right now. We also know there's an intention to repeal that 2024 rule. Remember, before that 2024 rule, there wasn't another rule that was published in the Federal Register that we had an opportunity to comment on. Scott made the point that the process by which those drain tile delineations were made prior to the 2024 rule were driven by an internal Fish and Wildlife Service memo, formal document, et cetera.
Yeah, sort of standard operating procedure that they developed.
That wasn't open for public comment. So here is, just kind of playing this out. What's at risk here? Because we've had some conversations like, well, this is a request for information. They might repeal the rule and then publish a rule to replace it. They don't have, well, I should be careful here because I don't know. I don't know legally, but I guess we would be fearful of repealing this rule and then asking the question, would they have to replace it, or could they just go back to the administrative internal guidance? And so I asked that as a question, not as saying I know that for fact. I just want to be very clear on that. But I think it's a reasonable thing to ask. And I do that to emphasize the importance of acting now.
Yeah.
Keep in place what has been working. And I mean, my fear is it just blows us into this like vague space that feels very uncomfortable, doesn't have a known replacement that seems to work for farmers and work for wetlands and work for the folks that invested money into these easements. And that's what's confusing, is like, if you could write something out, if you could detail something out, maybe we could have a conversation. But it feels like we're going to get rid of this thing and then blah, right? Like, what is it?
We're scared of it. We're scared of the blah.
Yeah. And that lack of transparency. I mean, the 2024 rule is transparent for the service. It's transparent for the farmers. Everybody benefits. So, like, what's the bad thing of that? And
it has all the features that you would set out to provide in that kind of rule, right? Like,
exactly.
A lot of times there's arguments around, hey, we need to rescind a rule and we need to have a new rule because we don't have transparency and guarantees and all of these things. We have that in the existing rule, right? Yeah. That exists.
Yeah, and I feel like we're being told, like, this excuse my kind of French, this sucks, so let's fix it. And I'm like, what? Yeah. But it's not broken, right? Like, this is working. So,
and you go
guys,
back to the 2020.
Go ahead.
Mike, I'd just say you can go back to the 2024 rule and look at all the comments that were submitted for it. And there weren't a whole lot of adverse comments associated. There weren't a whole lot of comments submitted at all. I mean, it was in the dozens, a couple dozen comments for the 2024 rule. That was, and that's kind of relevant because that was a rule that landowners that had these easements would have been familiar with and had been using, and then it was just going to be codified. And if it was such a bad thing for all involved and affected by this, I mean, you would have. This is just sort of we're just sort of talking and speculating here, but you would have expected to have a boatload of comments. There weren't.
And remember, the dog is still eating the dog food out there.
The dog is still eating the dog food. That's right.
Yeah. Men, before we wrap up, and we've been, I tell you, we did not run advertisements on this. We're not going to even run like Spotify ads or anything. This is too important. It just runs straight through. But go ahead and tell folks again where they can get their comments in and, be heard. And folks, definitely go do that. It doesn't take a lot. Even if all you write is, I am in favor of retaining the 2024 rule. Period.
That's right.
Like that's an original comment. I mean, add a little flavor to it. Be diplomatic and respectful of the process. If you've got time to dig into this podcast and write something a little bit longer, a couple small paragraphs, go for it. These personal responses really, really matter. So, guys, where's the action kind of required stuff? Where can folks find that before we close out here?
Well, the easiest place I would direct you to is ducks.org/save the duck factory. There's going to be several links on that page. All of those will take you to, I think it says sign the petition still, but it takes you to the Federal Register where you can submit a comment. You can also go to Ducks Unlimited Facebook account, Instagram account, find some information there. There may be a link that would take you to an actual petition that we've got going, trying to amass as many signatures on that. But don't let your engagement stop with the petition. Your comments submitted to the Federal Register are the most important part. And you will find the opportunity to do that at ducks.org/save the duck factory.
Well, and I would say, there could be some folks who are like, I don't love DU. I'm not doing anything through DU. And you can go directly to the Federal Registry. And as you said, Mike, it is simple. It's like you click on submit, you put in your name and address and some information, and then it has a text box that you type in, and then you say, yep, that's what I want to send in. So
yeah, and I'll probably try to put something up on the Foul Weather Podcast Facebook and Instagram too for folks to get to it quickly. It's getting shared a lot. I was gone working 10 hours yesterday, and I opened up my social media, and like 3 out of 4 were like the don't drain the duck factory or don't drain the prairies. It was just constant. So this stuff's got traction, folks. So be part of it. This is the most solidifying thing I've seen in the duck community in years. Let's do it. I got a lot of people questioning it, like, hey, should I do this? I'm like, yeah, you should do this. Like, this is an all hands on deck type thing. So, man, I do really deeply appreciate you being here. Any last comments for everybody?
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Hey guys, today I'm interviewing my cat about his perfect bistro food. Percy, you seem to be a big Perfect Bistro fan. Care to comment? Totally. What do you like about it? You love the high quality ingredients? And the delicious flavors, of course. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Listen to Percy, guys. Visit perfectbistro.com to try it for your cat.
No, we appreciate the chance, and and Mike, I know we had some hiccups when we got going, so we appreciate your patience in getting this out to the audience. Like, as we've said, this is important stuff, and we want everybody to engage. And
well, I will cover that for you a bit, and so listeners understand, this messaging has to go out correctly. And there was time. This came out on Friday. I'm going to speculate. This is me. I think it came out on Friday intentionally. You lose 2 days of comment period right away. Nobody can get traction on this, right? I'm just going to leave it out there. But you guys were good. Like, I reached out to you, and you're like, we got to get our ducks in a row. Oh, pun intended. But like, you're getting the message out to people. You're doing it in a very organized manner, and I appreciate that. Right? Like, this has to be done correctly. So, no problem on hiccups and any little delay, guys. It's fine. This is how the process works, and I think people have to understand that. Again, folks are going to hear this on multiple platforms. I'm working on another really good one. I think trying to get we'll see if it happens, a few podcasts together and see if we can't do like a crossover event with some of our good friends in the duck podcast world. So,
well, here's my take. We'll know when we've had too much overlap of this message when we've got 1 million comments in the Federal Registry.
There you go.
Right?
That's right.
People can't see, but they can hear. I'm clapping for that. And I give you guys credit because I can tell you're all wore out from this topic. You've been talking about it internally.
Am I sliding down in my chair?
Everybody's sliding down in their chair. Their eyes look a little sunken. But this is what it takes, right? Aldo Leopold said it best. And God, I always say this, and then I can't come up with a quote. It's like, when you see the world and you see the potential damage to it, it's heavy. That's the basic comment, right? And so we're all feeling that burden a little bit right now.
Is it the quote that's like the consequence of an ecological conscience is that you live in a world of wounds? Is that it?
That is perfect. See, Brasher, you should just come teach for me.
But for both of you, hey,
yeah,
Mike Schumer, we've got another quote that I pulled out. It sits on my desk, but this one is relevant for this stuff today. So you have to indulge me. This will just take a second. And this comes from a book. A book is actually about quail by a guy named Guy de la Valdine, and it's called For a Handful of Feathers. So the quote is, those of us who understand the complex nature of a teal's life, the protection and food needed to grow feathers that send that image darting over the water, also understand what the chase and the kill do to the spirit of a man, their rewards and their shames. Because we understand and feel these things more acutely than our peers, it is sacrilegious of us not to protect with all of our might what resources remain to be saved. If we neglect our obligations, we deserve the contempt of generations to come. I think that's pretty appropriate for the stuff we're talking about here today.
Wow. Men, thank you. I'm direct cutting to the end because no one can trump that.